Might as well, right? Hi, welcome to the Wolf and the Bear podcast. So today we have a very special guest, Miss Mindy. What's up, dog? Mindy is one of my students. She is an incredibly gifted individual. She has kind of gone through a huge sort of advancement and change and sort of almost like shedding of skin in the past 2 years.
Nice things.
It's true though, dude. Like I remember when I mean, we just talked about this, but when I first met you, there was a fatigue that was so bone deep with you, so soul deep with you, and a lot of like pain, a lot of like, but also a very deep desire for not that, because we all know the people who really like to marinate, and I never felt that with you. And then fast forward 2 years, and I was just telling you during our class, I was like, oh my God, it's night and day, and so I'm so proud of that for you.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. So today I figured we would kind of go into a topic that is kind of important for both of us. And I would be very curious about sort of what your experience has been like from before sort of having an understanding of that concept and then after, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah. So how would you describe, because you're incredibly empathic. So when we first knew each other, you were kind of saying like, oh my gosh, this existence is painful. Like I feel everything.
So it's one of those things of like when you grow up that way and you don't know you don't know what's causing all of it. But your emotions can change for this or that reason and you don't understand why, or you just always feel drained.
Mm-hmm.
Feel drained by other people even if it wasn't on purpose, or you walk into a room or next to somebody and like sometimes I would even get like flashes of like images of things that they weren't great, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like and you're just walking past somebody or even touching somebody. It was difficult,
Mm-hmm.
especially if that person carried a lot of trauma or whatever, and then it became like it was just like it was all sticking all in my energy, and it was making me sick, like
Mm-hmm.
emotionally sick and physically sick, and had all sorts of diagnoses for different kind of pain, chronic pain, diseases and things. But at the heart of it, it was because I had no idea how to ever protect myself, my own energy, from giving it to other people and taking in their energy unknowingly or unwillingly, or just even in interactions with them. It was just like I would feel so drained for long periods of time. And so having the ability to get away from that, to be able to protect myself, learning first, like, oh, that's what being empathic is, like I'm actually feeling your feelings instead of me sympathizing with you or whatever. Like I didn't even have to know them, and I was feeling their feelings. So that's why I started, coming to people who, knew metaphysical ways that could possibly help me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what kind of started my journey.
Well, the other thing too is I don't know why this popped into my head, but this is something I'm going to mention. Empathy and sympathy are often misunderstood, because all empathy really is the identification and the ability to understand where someone might be coming from, or why they're doing what they're doing, or why they're feeling what they feel. So
Mhm.
so that can be a very sterile experience if you'd want it to be, if you'd like it to be. The other component that I think is the most challenging of that is when then you have a sympathetic response. Right.
Uh,
So you see a couple, like you're at a restaurant, you see a couple fighting. Well, if I have a very high strength of basically energetic hygiene, I can identify, and even with the intuition still active, I can say, oh, not only are they fighting, they're fighting about money, even though I can't hear it. And like
mhm.
this might actually be the demise of their relationship in about 5-ish years. Like that, I can get that information and never feel any of it, because that sympathetic component is not on the table for me with with strangers, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes unknitting those things from each other are hard. And the reason I speak about this with you specifically, because we've talked about this, and this is that double-edged sword of gifts that are like yours, or gifts in combination with your personality. The majority of people who start exhibiting any kind of intuition or noticing the unseen, they have a tendency to either be in environments where they were left alone a lot, so the energy was really what they interacted with the most, or if they were neglected, or if they were forced to be put into a parental role too early. Because then, what are you always asking from the universe? What's wrong? What do I need to do to fix it? What could be wrong? How can I anticipate how to protect myself and the people I love, even though I'm so young, even though I'm too young to be having that thought form? And so then, we grow up to be adults and we are still casting for that information. So I remember I told you one time, I said, you are bemoaning and really being negatively affected by this experience you have around people. But I said, there's also a part of you that in the purpose of keeping yourself safe, you're casting a net to know as much as you can around you. Yeah. And so on the one hand, that's why you're so good with almost no real training. Like, so that's awesome. But what was the cost of that? Well, the cost was years and years and years of discomfort, because that's like
pulling in everything.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So
all the negative and then just keeping it there, not knowing how to get rid of it. So
it's never free, and it's unfortunate, but I've said this before on the podcast with Terry. It's almost always the people that are cause the most discomfort with it that are the most naturally good. So call that an ironic reality with all this stuff. The thing too that we need to recognize with our own energy when it comes to protecting, we're going to use like the fountain theory, right? Because when it's something from Terry, obviously, with the meditations, right? Because we always talk about energy coming up from the top of our head and falling down around us, right? But it still gets taken back up through our root chakra. That's the meditation. That's the torus field we're creating, the cycle we're creating when we do what we do. But what people have to realize is that we have our own self-contained energy and we can throw it away. So the biggest way that I see people hemorrhaging energy is typically through anger, because it's so projected outward. Sadness and grief has a tendency to be inward. So it's draining in that it utilizes so much to sustain it within the body. But it is not so exteriorly lost. And I think, and big excitement, but that's just part of it. That's like a firecracker going off, like it's meant to be shared and spread. But we have to be very mindful when we get frustrated or upset or start careening into those, or OCD or overthinking, where we start our energies just starts sparking. It's kind of the way I see it in my mind's eye. And then it's gone. Like you can't, if you're not re-uptaking it, demanding it come back to you, it's gone. And now you've had a fit of rage and you're exhausted and the rest of the day is shot because all of your energy just hemorrhaged in this experience. The other way we can lose the energy would be when we allow people to attach to us, right? And it's almost never so obvious. It's almost like if I logged in for my class and I said, and you're exhausted too, right? And then I just start on this tangent of, oh my God, I just feel so bad in my body. And I just stare at you. And you're like, I don't want to talk about your body. Like, I'm here for class. But now, because I've put you in that situation, you have some options to basically give of your own energy and say, oh my God, no, you look great. And spend energy repairing my self-esteem. And the way that I went about that doesn't really make me a villain, but it does make me basically forcing you to give me your energy. Because if you don't, if you just say, oh, well, that sucks, but let's start class, then the cost of that is probably something about the way I perceive you. So you're your hands are tied.
It seems callous, and so that's where it's hard for me to, because I have people in my life that will do these things.
Your kids, they do that all the time.
Was the first one that, and I'm literally thinking of one of them as soon as they get in the car.
Most kids do that.
And then it's like, but wait a minute, it's like, sometimes I'll engage with that and I'll do exactly what you're saying. And I'm like, but I don't want to do that. And then some days I'll just be like,
right.
It's like, what is the perfect response? Can you tell?
The perfect response is, how much energy do you have in the tank that moment?
Right.
Because
Okay.
we recognize the hands are out. It's like, can I
Yeah.
have some more, please? You know,
Yes.
we've got friends like that, parents like that, kids like that, and they're not villains for wanting it.
You have the luxury though with your kids. I mean,
Yes.
I like to think so anyway. You have this luxury to be able to tell them, hey, I don't, like, sorry you had a bad day, but I don't have time for this right now. Whereas, if you're getting an adult or whatever, that's a little bit more difficult if they're coming into a situation where they're trying to get your energy and you're not wanting to give it to them. You have to, be a little bit more diplomatic about it. And that's what's hard for me.
True, but I will say this also. I wish that people would like defend or we should be willing to risk the uncomfortable to protect our energy, because we say energy so frequently, especially now in terms of like the new age. Everyone's throwing that word around. Dude, your energy is what propels everything that you want and need to get done. Energy is this undefined source that can be used for good or bad, but we have a finite amount of it, and it has to be replenished. And it has to be replenished by healthy behavior with food and sleep, but also our soul, which is not bound by the needs of our body, needs to be fed. And so that's a lot for one person to do on any given cycle. So you shouldn't be willing to give that up very easily. There does come a point where you're like, I'm having to maintain my own energy. I do hope that the people I surround myself are good at that as well. I don't expect perfection. I'm not perfect, but I do announce it. I try to. No one's perfect, but I'll be like, I need energy. I feel very insecure. And it's up to you if you've got that to give. But if you don't, just recognize I might be quiet for a while. So
Yeah.
you see, so it's like I think self-awareness is everything. I think you can't ever prevent those days where you have nothing to give, and you can't always prevent those days when you do go begging. Like sometimes we're exhausted and we're kind of revert to that kid, and we're just like, does anybody have anything to give to make me feel better? You know what I mean? And so it's okay from both sides. Like no one's a villain, but if you are that person who is constantly going to an exterior source to feel better and get energy, just recognize that there is an avenue of existence that isn't quite so dependent on others. Because the problem is that when somebody starts doing that on the regular, they almost, if there is any self-awareness or not, they kind of start resenting the people that make them feel better, because there's an acknowledgement that they shouldn't be doing that. So that guilt gets turned into resentment against the person that they're using to get energy. And that's a very complicated cycle. And that's a little bit more nefarious, but most people aren't doing that.
Well, one thing that recently, well, I say recently, but it's been like months and months and months, that I've found a little bit more helpful is kind of trying to realize where your energy went. Like where did you spend it, or who took it, like whether you knew about it or not,
Or you gave it.
Right. Whether you gave it to them or they took it, your energy went with them for whatever reason, and their energy's with you, and you don't like that. Is to identify that, but then to demand that your energy return back to you, and you give their energy back to them, and that has changed a lot for me, because it's like you can feel the difference right after you do that. Like, wow, something just really lifted off my shoulders when I did that, and it made a huge difference. It's because, energy is a physical thing, but we don't always see it. But just even your thoughts have energy, and when we're speaking or thinking any of those things, you can get some of your energy back. So if you it's kind of like doing a self evaluation of, okay, where did it go? If I feel so drained right now, okay, I used it here to do housework, or I used it here. Oh, I had this negative interaction with this person, and I keep thinking about that. That's still taking my energy. And so just like to consciously let it go and take your energy back has been just so helpful for me.
Well, and what you just said about the whole thinking about people, like that is a big, big way that we can know maybe like someone's thinking about us, or because that's sort of how it shows up when people are around you in an energy, is you wind up just thinking about them, or you wind up reflecting on something about them, and you don't know why. So for instance, if you've got an old best friend and you want nothing to do with them, like maybe you were wronged severely, whatever the case may be, and you know that it's not in your energy to think about them because you're over it and you're truly healed from it, and yet out of nowhere you start thinking about them a lot. I have enough awareness of my own energy that I would pretty much automatically assume this isn't me, most likely. If it is me, cool, and I will move on from it. But if it's not me, then that's when I'll say, hey, my space is my own, my energy is my own. It's time to go.
Right.
And I don't blame anybody for sniffing around. I'll feel my mom around me sometimes. I'll feel certain people around me that I haven't talked to in a while sometimes. But the reality is I don't have it to give. So I'm going to just need you to get out of my energy. And I never feel a pull off me, but I feel like, oh, you're in my head a little bit. And I don't love that either. I'm a control freak too. Like, you know what? My thoughts are mine. Go on, get now.
Yeah.
But it's part of it. Like, just like when we think about other people, we send ourselves to them and we don't even know that we're doing that. So then they're thinking about us, and maybe we don't. It's just something to be aware of when it comes to, I guess, like the management of it is recognizing what energy can or cannot do, because it just has no laws of physics, so to speak. And it's very, very led by thoughts, and thoughts are notoriously unfocused and fickle. And so that's one of the reasons why we train our mind to have a certain response to these things, these experiences of metaphysics, when we want them. Because if we just think, I don't like to feel this way, and we haven't built a tool to make that so, it's almost like picking up a weapon you don't know how to use. You're just like, I have no idea. And then there's danger with that as well. There's concerns about, what you can and cannot come across when you begin a process of wielding what is our birthright, right? Our birthright is the ability to control our energy.
Right. And I think that's what most people don't know. Like they don't tell you that as a child.
Good point. Mm-hmm.
Which I think we should spend more time, like think about it. All of the things that we're involved in, it's usually with adults.
Yes.
Like we don't talk about it in schools, or like your personal energy. And I tried a few times as a science teacher, but that wasn't something that was like, that was something the kids really wanted to do. But obviously, if you're a teacher, they have certain agendas.
Yeah.
For things that, which is one of the reasons why I couldn't stay, teaching for the state, is just because it's like we need more of an education. Like we need to educate people on health, on their energy, on that it's more than just like light energy, heat energy.
Right. Thank you, dude. I mean, I'm not so to anybody who's listening, what I love about having you on here, and like what I like about, call it an echo chamber, call it what you want, but I have always appreciated how real you or how like kind of grounded you perceive all of this. You have the exact same excitement and curiosity, and you're quite charmed with metaphysics, but you also are like, okay, but also like this is real too. Like we got to be smart, we got to be careful. You know what I mean? And I've always admired that. And for you to kind of stand on business when it's like this is not what I want to be teaching. Like I think that's so admirable. But that's also in your energy. You're very strong on what you believe. And I think that's a product of previous times here too. I don't think in most recent experiences, I don't think you've been a weaker soul at all.
Thank you.
In fact, what's interesting is, you're experimenting, I feel, and maybe you've done it in previous, but when I say experimenting with a concept, I do want everyone to recognize, I mean, over lifetimes, right? So yeah. I don't mean this is your first time working on this, but you're beginning the process and you're in the middle of it with, ironically, almost a keeping of the peace, because I feel like for the majority of the experiences, you've been the one, you've been groundbreaking the chains. So it's weird because that's a very destructive endeavor, but obviously with a good intention. So it's and that's been what you were intended to be doing, I feel. But it is weird for you to say, all right, well, now I got to start the lifetime processes of like learning how to not do that. And I think you probably see that in yourself.
That's funny because, I've always been told, like, coming up in careers, don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
Don't stay in your lane. Don't rock the boat. And I'm like, but I'm a boat rocker. But we need to
Yes.
rock this boat because some things need to go. Some things need to change, and it's like, you can't just keep doing stuff the way you always did stuff because it's the way you always did stuff because nothing will ever get better.
Well, and do you remember in Little Mermaid, I think, remember when they capsize the boat and they're underneath it?
I do.
It's, I think, like, because at some point I feel like you've had some experiences where you're under the boat, you capsized alone, and you're like, why did I do that? Like, why am I here alone? Like, I got to go figure this out.
Definitely
You know what I mean?
too.
But that's part of it. I mean, like, God, that's the experience, and for you, I remember, what was it, our first class, maybe our second class, where we were talking about spiritual hygiene, and we kind of talked about like the bubble, right? And that was something that you said you felt like was a really helpful tool. So I'm going to kind of let you explain that.
Okay.
We'll see how well you listen. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's like your energy bubble, and it's like a protective bubble. And so it's kind of like, if you know about real bubbles, if you've ever experimented with real bubbles, if you get your hand wet, with the bubble solution, you can actually like reach in or out of a bubble without popping it because it's coating you or whatever.
It's
And
malleable.
so I feel like it's kind of like that, because once you put your energy bubble, it's like a protective shield that you can see through, that if you need to reach out through, you can do without popping your bubble. Like you don't have to undo your bubble to interact with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's
like a one-way mirror.
And the first thing that I do is ground and clear. And that is something that I learned from Terry.
Hell yeah. Love her.
Is to ground and clear, because you want to.
And what does that mean?
Okay, so you're grounding yourself. And I kind of picture like roots going down.
And you're grounding to earth energy.
Right. And then when I'm clearing myself, I'm releasing any energy that's not mine.
Perfect.
Okay. Anything that might be stuck on me, anything that's trying to, or anything that I've just, even if it's negative or whatever, and it's something that started, just release it, ground it, and it's a lot like electrical energy.
Absolutely.
That has to be grounded to the earth. So it's like,
well, we are, right?
Yeah, we are. We have a lot of electrical fields, like your heart, your brain, everything has all these electrical fields. And they actually, I was just reading Scientific American, and those electrical fields in your brain can actually interact and cause thoughts instead of synaptic firing. And I know that's kind of nerdy, but that's exciting, because what that means is electrical energy fields are interacting and sharing information without the physical act of a neuron firing and connecting to another neuron.
And think about how scary. Think about, like, let's just sit with that for a second, because how scary is it if I'm sitting here and, like you said, all of us are outputting electromagnetic energy
all the time,
right? And so if that study, which has just been published, proves that my electromagnetic energy can influence the synaptic firing of your brain, if we're close enough.
It can bypass it. Yeah.
How much should we care about the company we keep, right?
Yes, and
that's terrifying.
And that is exactly what I was saying with like the empathic type energy of, you're touching somebody or you're even close to somebody and you start getting on, like their feelings or whatever, and you don't realize it. For empaths that don't realize they're empathic, but they're, in a lot of pain, or they're absorbing a lot, or they can't control feelings or whatever because they're not their own. This is something that's helpful. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever jumped on a trampoline, or you have the socks on and your hair's all flying up, stuck with electricity, and then you go over to shock, like you touch somebody and it shocks them, or touch a pole. That is grounding.
Oh
like
yeah.
you're letting that excess energy leave you. And so
Yes.
that's literally what you're imagining and doing with your energy. And just by imagining it in the first place and thinking it, that's a physical process. I mean, it's
Yes.
even though we're thinking kind of metaphysically, it's literally a physical process. And so it's you're actually sending energy down, like down to the earth or wherever. I've heard some people that release it, to the source or
Up to,
whatever,
yeah, that's an interesting
anywhere,
perspective. Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
whatever your way is a good thing for you to displace this extra energy that's unwanted and not yours. And so once you do that and you clear yourself, then you're protecting yourself. You're cleaning
Absolutely.
up. It's like you said, the wand shield thing on the Harry Potter at
Yeah.
the end when they were protecting the castle,
Or
or even
think Glinda,
in
the good witch, when she rolls in a bubble. That's another way that you can
that's true
visualize that.
too. Yeah, bubbles. I mean, like bubbles are they're really effective, and so
Well, because they're a closed circuit.
they are closed, and they only let certain things in. It's also like it's kind of like your cells. Your cells have this semi-permeable membrane, and they only let the things in that they want to let in, and they
Yeah,
send
that they're
out the
programmed
trash.
to.
So
Well,
yes, they send out the waste, and so you're sending out the waste energy, and then you're only going to let in, what you want. So you're imagining this bubble around you, and you're sealing it off. You seal off your energy, and so then when you go into an environment where there's a lot going on, and there's maybe energies there that are not, they don't feel good, and that's the
right.
best way I can describe it,
Yeah.
because maybe there's just, like I said, when I went into the sports bar or whatever, then I was like, that didn't feel good, and I
You're like,
immediately
hate this.
yeah, and then I actually was able to enjoy my meal even with all of the other stuff going on around me. And so, because that's a very charged, energetically charged environment, and it's not
Oh yeah.
necessarily the energy I want to feel.
No. And like
So,
you said, especially with football going on and people are just hemorrhaging energy left, right, and center. And where is that going? It's just going out into the air, right? Like it's uncontrolled. If honestly, what's weird is I bet you if you were in a deficit of energy, there's a lot of free energy in places like that.
yeah,
You know what I'm
but it's
saying?
not necessarily the kind of energy that
Not
you want,
necessarily, but
you
a
know?
starved person's a starved person, right? So you see all these people that go there alone and they spend their whole afternoon there. And then they go home and they're probably a little bit drunk or tipsy, and then they do it all again the next day. Part of it's probably the alcohol, and part of it also is that is always a place where if you feel like you have no energy, you get to share that space with other people that you don't ever really have to talk to. So you get your energy, you get kind of what you need out of that sometimes. And so I do notice that. When I was in school, I used to do that a lot with studying because I found studying very challenging. I was ADHD, focusing is hard. And I always found that when I could be around a lot of people, but then just plug my headphones in, that I felt robust.
Uh-huh.
So I definitely used places like that for sure as a tool. Concerts are a lot that way too. People always feel like very, very energized after. They don't realize everyone's giving up free energy that day. Like, and they're doing it on
Uh-huh.
purpose. They're like celebrating the excitement of what they're viewing or what they're hearing. Everyone kind of has their guards down, especially if you go into
Churches.
EDM where the drugs are present. You know what I
That's
mean?
what that's the benefit of why people, go to churches
Hmm.
for that collective uplifting energy too.
Yeah, and you're kind of skimming off the top, which is very, very, very different than either asking someone directly to give it to you or to take it. And the reason it's sort of one of those, how do we say, like harvesting energy is always a very strange thing because it's never really ideal because the ideal version would be you being able to generate your own.
Yeah.
But harvesting in that way from big crowds is, in my worldview, a pretty innocuous way if you're not quite capable yet of doing it yourself, right? Because this is a process and a gradient of success. So, I would recommend that to somebody, honestly, if they were saying, like, hey, I'm not doing well, I'm trying to do better, I'm trying to be better, but I am so depressed in the evenings, I would probably say, well, go by yourself to a movie because there's a bunch of people and they're all expelling energy because they like what they're seeing or they're responding and you're responding with them, which means you're kind of doing that together. People start sharing energy when you share experiences like that. So do you see what I'm saying? It's like the movie's not going to do anything for that
I'm
person, but
going to
that's
comedy, just FYI.
yeah, absolutely. Like anything where yeah, like anything to where or but the movie could be like say you just love horror. Like that's actually your
Yeah,
thing. So you could go feed your soul because it's what you like and also feed your energy because that's a place that you could do that.
true.
It's a gray, interesting. It's more so anything kind of taking advantage of the laws of how energy works. It's not the same as something ritualized or weird. Like don't make it weird. you
Yeah,
know,
you don't have to harvest it that way.
no. And that is one of the things that I cautioned you about a lot. I still do. I get so protective of people. It's not a judgment thing at all. At some point it becomes a judgment thing. At some point I think people are just bad people. But more often than not, um, I think sometimes the really ritualized ways of going about things that gets really dicey. I've probably said that 100 million times on the podcast over different topics. But with energy in particular, you have to be very mindful of how actually anytime you receive energy that is not generated from within, it's probably mindful to keep an eye on that. If you're getting it from friends and family all the time, something's probably wrong. Something's failing in your own generation of it. We got to look at that. If you notice someone like you start dating somebody and then you're exhausted all the time, that just happened to me. I couldn't figure out why I was exhausted all the time and why all of my ambition just was gone. All these things. And I was being on the surface treated relatively well. But God, I had no idea where all that energy was going because I was a little bit blind to it. But so we have like the bubble thing, right? But we also have one thing you said just now was sort of the permeability of it. That bubble factors too when it comes to worldview. Because, for instance, if you're determined to be a victim, you're not going to let in the experiences that say, oh my God, you just got really lucky. Oh my gosh, you just got something you don't deserve and you didn't earn. So isn't that magical? You're only ever going to see when you feel like something was taken from you or when you were wrong. So we often like it would be mindful to sort of do some diagnostic checks on that bubble and like kind of make sure what you're letting in is exactly what you want, or is this bubble of protection also creating an echo chamber of thought forms that aren't serving you. These are always things we think about when it comes to spiritual hygiene.
Yeah, but that's the importance of not just forming a bubble around yourself as is. It's the importance of actually, like kind of taking stock, grounding and clearing that stuff, because we're all going to have that stuff.
Yeah.
We're all going to have self-defeating thoughts. We're all going to have,
Yes.
anxious things. We're all going to have the things that we do.
We're going to hate ourselves.
Yes.
What do you think that does to our energy when we hate ourselves? But we do
That's
it.
also, like you're not just saying surround myself in all of my energy and whatever it is. I'm like, and if there's negative energy, just send that away and heal it, repair it, fix it. And it's like, because I picture it going down into the earth, what I see the earth doing is like, it's mirrored in the physical world of compost. You send your garbage decays, the earth literally over time turns that into nutrients and life and all sorts of things and recycles it. And it's like, and I also give thanks, because I'm like, thanks for taking this and turning it into something better, because it's my garbage. I'm sending it away and having it go out. And I really feel like that the earth can do that in all of, in all of its physicality and energetically, spiritually, all of that stuff. And it's not like I'm saying, I'm not like saying, pray to a goddess form of whatever, but it's literally something that we're on, carries a lot of energy. It's full of light, you know what I mean? In just so many levels that I feel like you can send your energy down into the earth, and it
absolutely
takes, like I said, it takes our electricity and it makes it safe, like every electrical wire, they have those grounding poles and wires down there, and in all of our sockets we have a grounding hole in it. So that's all important.
there's that process, fire breathing. It's a meditative process, and it's very similar. It's mainly around the concept, the feelings of rage and anger.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of where you kind of tether that rage into your breath, and then you breathe it out into the air.
Yes.
So God, those are such great tools. I'm so glad we kind of stumbled onto that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's another form of clearing your energy, of basically putting it through a like a filter.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about when somebody is sort of creating their own issues within their own energy, right? Like, because we do see that with people. Um, what would your kind of advice be to someone that you're like, oh, you're your own worst enemy? Like, nobody could really help you with this. You've got to figure that out. Where do you think people start? What do you think the first step of that would be?
Well, I think first you have to have the ability to self-reflect to
Yeah,
even be able to see it, because if you can't see something in yourself, you can't fix it, you know?
damn.
Like if you can't identify a problem, it's going to be really hard to start working on it. And so just
Mm,
something like even if even if you just journaled like your thoughts, and then just like journal all of your feelings and your thoughts about whatever's going on, or and then take a look at it. Maybe you take a look at it like it's another person wrote it, or like a friend,
mm,
like if you could just kind of take yourself out of yourself, but observe and be like, oh, or what would so and so say to me if, or what would even put it on a different person? Like
mm-hmm.
if this other person were doing this, how would I judge them? What would I be saying to them? You know? And so
Absolutely.
that's probably the first step. But then, once you're in that, if you just stay there in that kind of self-loathing, self-deprecating place of identifying all of your bad stuff, that's a really bad place to stay. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to also be able to identify it and then let it go, and then really see yourself with more compassion, I think. And that
Yeah.
it goes back to loving yourself, and just, like there are so many events or things that I've been to where that's really the theme that people come back with. If
Mm-hmm.
they journey or do the guided meditations or whatever, that I would say so often is the message, is that you need to love yourself. You need to love
Mm.
yourself first, you know, and part of that, in order to love yourself, you got to be able to
Know
accept certain
yourself.
things. You got to know yourself, and then you got to say, okay, that is a part of myself, but I can work on that. Just like I'm not going to count myself down and write myself off and not be my own friend kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you still have to love yourself and let certain things go. And maybe for me, it's been helpful just to be vulnerable. Just to be vulnerable
Absolutely.
in the right circles, to the right people. You don't just go
To the right
talking to
people.
you don't just go talking to
Oh no.
obviously people who are already mean to you. You don't go talking to strangers about all of this, but it's like finding people to talk to about it. You really realize we're all like more the same than you even know, and that everybody's kind of struggling with those issues too. And so that's
Well,
what I found so helpful.
what I call that process too, I call it putting a spotlight on,
Okay.
because the the biggest, most nefarious issue with insecurities or pains or things that we're not knowing of ourselves is that because we don't identify them super clearly, they get to make decisions for us and we don't see it. We don't understand the influence that's occurring. And so, if I'm insecure and I lash out at you because I'm insecure about something about me and I don't know why, I think I just don't like you, that's a big issue, because there's a big vulnerability there, because I am not knowing something about myself. I don't know why I'm being mean to you. So
Mhm.
that makes me um, at risk of somebody knowing me better than I know myself, which the thought of that really bothers me, right? I don't like that vulnerability. But then the other problem is now I've lost a friend, not because of the right reason, not because I didn't decide I genuinely don't like you.
Yeah.
Something you did made me insecure, and then I was mean to you. Like,
Yeah.
that's very different. but yet the end is the same, which is you're not my friend and you don't care for me and you don't want to be around me, which is valid.
It goes back to fear of something. And I don't like, even, anger, sadness, all of those things. It's like the reasons why we do things that are kind of negative. It really does revolve around fear, but we don't often identify it and ask ourselves, what are we really afraid of in that situation?
Mm-hmm.
Or what's the worst that can happen? Or how, like, what is worrying about this and treating this person this way? How is that going to help? And so it's kind of like you have emotions, and your emotions are kind of like signals. Like they're kind of like those signals on your car that's like check engine light, but you don't know. You don't know what that check engine light means. It doesn't tell you exactly what it is, like it could mean your oil needs to be changed, or it's dripping or whatever, or, it could be a major problem under the surface. And you don't know unless you kind of delve a little further and you check it, but you kind of have to look at your emotions as like, what's the reason I'm experiencing this emotion?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
your rational brain, your emotional brain, they kind of have to, like, one has to talk to the other one instead of just reacting. And when we react on emotions, it's usually not the best choice, like, because they're not our directions.
Well, they're so fickle,
Yes,
you
they are
know,
fickle,
and
and
so
they
they
totally
feel
are.
so strong in the
But and
moment.
it's the and being a woman, that's even harder too, because
Yep.
the reasons your emotions change, they may not be rooted in something real. You know what I mean? Like it
Or
could,
like we just said, they might not even be our own.
right. It could not be your own emotions, and that's another hard thing. It could be something related to physiology and your hormones, or something you ate.
Mm-hmm.
It could be related to some deep trauma that you're burying and you
Yeah.
don't want to evaluate. And so that's why I think it's important to break down, okay, what's this emotion? What's the reason I might be feeling this way?
And bring it into the light so that everyone's looking at it so it can't go do its own thing. Like, as
Right.
long as we know it's there and if I come to you and say, hey, today I'm feeling incredibly body dysmorphic, I'm
Yeah.
significantly less likely to go purge food or starve myself because there's another person in the world that knows as of today I've been struggling with this. So if I don't want to have to then go and own that I did something like that I'd be ashamed of, I'm just less likely to do it because we do our worst things in the dark and we do
Right.
our worst things around our most negative emotions. So if we can admit them, even if we haven't sussed them out yet, even if we haven't healed them, to bring them into your own light, but then the light of somebody that really loves and cares about you, you start to notice you really defang the effect of that emotion when you've shared it and it's kind of on the table. Because now it's like, well, it's not that I can't do anything super weird because
Yeah.
I know that would be why I'm doing it. I've brought it into the light.
Yeah.
And the thing too is like, it was a big game changer. There's this phrase where it's like, anger is just the bodyguard of grief. So when we start to understand, unadulterated anger, it's almost, it can't really exist unless there is something that has brought upon like deep sadness, deep something is wrong. I have been wronged. And now I either I've chosen to not defend myself like I should, or I've allowed the wrongness to occur so many times that now I'm blowing up. Because anger is the body. It's there to say, I am very upset about something. My
Yeah.
soul is in duress, and now I need to fight for myself, and I'm doing it through this avenue. So even that isn't the same rage level. Like, did you hear about this? I'm going to tie this together, I promise. Did you hear about that Zach Bryan thing?
No.
Apparently this dude's like not a great guy. There's a good argumentation that allegedly he might have beat up his girlfriend. He definitely tried to hit her with a 12 million payout to sign an NDA. He's like a really big country artist. I don't know him that well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but now all these videos are coming out from when they were together, and she was always saying like, "Oh my gosh, we were at this concert and then like my friend jumped off of a trailer and she kneed me in the nose. So I broke my nose," and like she's moving on, but just a bunch of things that are like, that's weird. That's a weird fishy story. So it seems like there's some stuff going on. But I was thinking about him just now for some reason because it seems to be true that he would rage out. Maybe there's alcohol involved, maybe there's not. And so then my next question to myself as we were talking was I was thinking, what would be the empathetic viewpoint to navigate his rage? So then I was thinking, it's like there's a deep, it's a deep insecurity. It's a sense of being not enough, which is a grief. It's a sense of fear of being left, which is a grief system. And it seems like that his response to those bottling up was to rage out and apparently be pretty uncontrollable, like nobody could calm him down. And then the apology cycle would begin. It's just an abusive cycle. So I'm not saying that's okay, because it sounds like he kind of beat the crap out of her, allegedly. But even still, he's not embodying the soul vibe of rage. There's all these other things that are just really, really sad in him. And like, that's the thing you got to address the rage. But people just say, well, here's like breathing exercises, stay calm. It's like, no, we got to figure out what's got you so.
Those are the Band-Aids.
Sad. Like,
yeah, like the breathing and whatever, anger management, that's just a Band-Aid. Or, like you said, hemorrhaging. But you need to get to the root cause, definitely, of that situation.
It's so unfortunate, because I have a lot of empathy for those who are hurting so bad and they don't know how to control it. They can't seem to control it. And in his perspective, it seems like maybe there's a career impact that could be particularly noticeable. So he might, there's a reality that you might lose everything, or you might have to spend a lot of time rebuilding, all because you couldn't know yourself. Like, all because you couldn't get it together and you couldn't pay yourself the attention to not allow these things to become so out of your own control. Like, God, I can't imagine living a world where, and drinking, like people who drink so much that they black out and the next day everyone's like, you won't believe what you did. Or you're like looking at those text messages where you're like, oh my God, I said what to who?
Oh, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
About drinking.
Yes.
It was discussed in another group, and I was like, I want to ask about that. Okay. So, somebody said, and I don't know if it's true because I didn't research this or evaluate the statement, but that there's a reason why alcohol is called spirits. And that if you get drunk, you're like, how your inhibitions are going away and everything. And that gives room for spirits to, like anything that may be malicious or just playing around to take over, because you've turned off your mind and your body's kind of, and just that state of being drunk. Like, are you spiritually at risk?
That's a great question, and I'm going to answer that pretty fully. So we're going to go back to just the process of drinking, right? So so alcohol is a distillate, right? So it's hyper focusing and extracting, right? So when we want vanilla, what do we do to the bean? We soak it in alcohol, right? So it pulls out essence.
Okay.
So that is a component to why you'll be drinking with somebody and you can kind of get a grasp on where they are internally, because it kind of just, it gets distilled, man. It comes out. So if you've got a lot of rage in you, or rather you've got a lot of grief in you that you haven't addressed, you might start crying when you're drinking out of nowhere. You might start talking about your feelings a lot, or you might start getting rageful at other people because you're trying to get this out of your energy because you can't when you're sober because you're not an aggressive person. You know what I mean? Like all these repressive things, everyone thinks, oh, it just, it makes me angry. No, it just makes you more of what you actually are.
So what if it does the opposite?
If you're happy drunk, I love that. I love those people.
That's what I'm saying. What if it does the opposite?
I am a very
angry and you're mad about something, and people do that too. They do it to like to even out their feelings because they don't want to feel it. It's kind of like it's numbing it.
Yes.
But if it's like you drink a glass of wine or whatever to take the edge off because you're feeling so stressed or angry, and then it's like you're nicer or you're less stressed. So
because think about what the composite of most people's lives are. Most people's lives are actually quite good. They're pretty manageable and they're pretty happy. So when something stressful occurs, you're able, I mean, and again, there's some biological realities like alcohol is a natural stimulant. It's a natural but it's also a natural depressant. Yes. It's a natural anti-anxiety response. So it shuts down a lot of the negative neural pathways that we have. And that's why it's so useful sometimes. But when we drink into excess is really more what I'm talking about, because the biology is going to take over that first end of it. It's going to make you more chill. It's whatever.
Right.
But when we tip the scale, you start to see, oh, something like I'm a very happy drunk, and then sometimes for people who run a little bit high tempered on the sexual front, then they're always doing crazy stuff when they're drinking, right? Because that is in their energy. So that's a component of what you kind of get into when you start taking it within your energy. Now, this is my belief system about the next part. So, and this is something that I feel is a reality. So again, it's something I've seen, it's something I've experienced. So, I guess that's up to everybody, but this is something I would put I'd stand on. Any time that your body is no longer a comfortable vessel, we have the ability to leave it. So that's one of the reasons why people who have severe dementia, I always say, oh, they're not in their body much because it's not useful to be there anymore. So that's how your grandma who wasn't at the grandbaby's birthday party, is in the middle of a, amnesiac moment. And then out of nowhere, she says, oh my God, I loved the blue birthday cake at so-and-so's party. And you're just like, what? How in the world? How does she know that? Like, well, it's because she was there. She just doesn't, you know what I mean? Like she doesn't know she sent her energy out, but her vessel is no longer that comfortable. So it's basically a form of astral travel. It's the abdication of the throne of the physical vessel to be elsewhere because there's discomfort. That could also be, for instance, a lot of people who have very violent deaths, physically violent deaths, will always sort of talk about how they left their body before the issue. Because because it doesn't, if the death is already done, right? Like this is you're out, this is when you're supposed to go. There is no benefit to the physicality of it. That's the other reason why sexual abuse in children, ritualistic abuse in children, all these things, why they are typically very hard memories to recall, is because oftentimes the spirit will leave the body to protect the energy. We call that amnesia, right? We call that, but really there is a spiritual component where they're just not there, okay. Right? And so maybe they're seeing it from the corner where they're watching their physical form be assaulted, but the physical experience of it, they're being protected from. So obviously there's still psychological trauma, but it's almost like the spirit is like, to be there right now would be damning maybe, and damaging to the point where I could no longer get done the rest of the contracts I need to get done. So we're going to go for now. So then that enters into how uncomfortable our body becomes when we drink. And so we basically poison our vessel to the point where the spirit is like, I'm done with this. This is incredibly uncomfortable. I'll see you in the morning, basically. And so what then that makes room for, and what you're sort of speaking about, is if there is ever any energy who is essentially what I call looking for a joyride, that's the opportunity, right? Yeah. If you abdicate the body, abdicate the throne, and you say, I'm going to be up here for a while because I've gotten so drunk, the body sucks to be in. I'm just going to be over here. And it's almost like good luck to the body. Yeah. And what's very interesting is a lot of times people will talk about the experience of they remember the night exactly to the point that they get home, or they remember everything and they black out right at the moment where they got in the Uber, and then they forget, because we are still protecting the vessel if we can. So the body, your spirit's essentially like, I got to get this chick home and I got to make sure it's safe. And the moment that's true, I'm getting out of there because this feels bad. Yeah. It's low vibration. And some people drink to the point where they black out and then they make big mistakes, or somebody aggresses them, or so there's a lot of consequence there, right? But we do see evidence of the spirit kind of being like, we'll be here until we don't have to be, if we can, if we don't get kicked out because the poison is so much, right? Because the spirit is not interested in being damaged along with the vessel. They are not the same. So I'm going to go. I'll be back. And so that's sometimes why, like at clubs at 2 a.m., you'll see somebody who's normally really calm maybe, and they just have pure rage behind their eyes. That could be either they've drank so much that they're actually that rageful, or there's something within them for the moment. But this topic is exactly why I talk about how proud I am and how protected I am of the fact that we are so strong spiritually without even trying. Because the reality is, We don't wake up possessed. All of us have probably done it to the point where we drink and the next day we just have a headache and it sucks and we're throwing up or something and we're embarrassed. But even without doing any type of protective element, by the time our body is a safe vessel again, we're back in there. And we, without any effort at all, are able to remove what's present, what could have possibly been present. And the reality, too, is by the time you're passed out, you're no longer an interesting vessel to have. So they're probably going to dip anyway. You know what I mean? They're there to have an experience. They're not there to chill with you while you sleep. And they're not strong enough to do anything further than that.
They're just opportunistic.
Now, if you're getting blackout drunk every single night, there's a very good likelihood you show up with an attachment because you're a guaranteed ride. All they got to do is wait a couple hours. But that's the other reason why people who have attachments to them, unfortunately, there's only a couple of ways or reasons that could be true. And so it's not to be proud of. Some people are like, oh yeah, this dark energy has been with me forever and da-da-da. And there's like almost a pride to it. It's like, well, what that really tells me is that at some point in time, you were so far out of your power that either you cut a deal and you made a deal to have more power, or you were out of your seat, right? You were out of your position for so long that now you co-share the seat. Or you leave it so often, like with the drinking, that they just hang around until you're gone. You know what I mean? Like and the other instance would be abuse, spousal abuse. You see it sometimes where people just basically decide to no longer live their life, be an active participant because the abuse is so prevalent. And so then they will also often show indications of having attachments. Sometimes they are unconscious agreements that are made in a weakened state where they're, imagine you're like crying in the bathroom and you're in such a low vibration that it's quite a match for other things. And then somebody comes by and says, hey, I can make this feel better. I promise. And then you say yes. Well, that's an attachment. Like that's an agreement. It's different than conjuring up with a ritual thing, but it's still something that can happen to people, unfortunately. But attachments, like we've talked about, are pretty rare. But my point just being is these energies that are not of the physical, or that are, of the earth plane, right? Not of the soul bearing etheric, what we are children of, what we're God given rights to go back to. The energies that don't have that, they're kind of like, even at their best, they're so much weaker than we are. So they're always playing that manipulative game, or they're always going for our weakest link, like our weakest people. And that's just because they are that weak. So, but yes, to answer your question, that is what I believe about drinking and what I believe spiritually happens during that process.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird, right?
What about when you go under for a procedure and you are under general anesthesia?
It's very similar to the same. And that's one of the reasons why I say this till I die. If I ever know somebody, or if I ever am in a coma, I would plead, like, you need to go find a shaman. You need to go find somebody who is gifted in spirit, like soul retrieval. Because what that is your soul gets lost. That's what it is. I'm sorry. Like, you know what I mean? It can get lost. Now, with general anesthesia, you kind of know that it's happening.
And there's a time frame. Like, there's a time frame.
Well, honestly, but the time frame is not so important because time is not necessarily the same in the area that we go to. So
right.
You could be under general anesthesia for 2 weeks and still probably wake up okay because you knew that was occurring to you.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You know that there's an end to it, so it's not like, like, I'm out of this.
Why comas are so challenging, that the ones that stay really like almost all comas typically are not the ones that you don't wake up from. They're almost never the ones that you're induced into, right? Or they're the ones that you're unconscious when they decide to induce you into it. But if you know that you're making a choice to be unconscious for a while, your energy knows that, that the knowledge is there. You're not leaving your body. You're not wandering. Whereas with the ones like you have a car accident, you don't even know what's happened. All you know is suddenly you're in an astral body. And maybe sometimes you're so shocked and jarred. Maybe your body is so uncomfortable that you're outside of it. You're looking down at yourself on the table, but you still have the silver cord, right? You know, to some degree, maybe you know, maybe you don't, that you're still alive. But the worst case scenario is you don't know because you've never read anything about metaphysics and you don't have a relationship with God maybe or anything studious about that. So you have no reason to know anything about what's going on and the processes therein. So then you start wondering because you're wondering, why can't anyone hear me? I must be dead. Maybe I'm dead. Maybe I'm not. I don't really get this. And then you kind of just start trying to figure it out. And then on top of that, imagine then that you're greeted by something that can respond to you, good or bad or not either. You start hanging out with them or spending time there, or you go back to the home that you were raised in and you stay there when your body's in the hospital and everyone's calling for you to wake up. And that's the other reason why a lot of people who come back from comas, they discuss the feeling of I was over here in this place and then I kept hearing that I was being called back. So that would be, that's what I would do if ever I knew somebody who was in a coma state, because I think it's very much spiritual, significantly more so probably than damage to the body, especially if the brain scans are coming back with neurotypical behavior, then it's a spirit thing in my world. And that's how I would address it. But yeah, that's sort of the answer to that. Our souls get so confused when we get forced out of our body and we don't know why. That's like the worst case scenario. That's why the sudden deaths are really challenging on souls. That's why deaths where you pass in the night, sometimes those energies can get stuck because they don't know that they died. They just know that everyone that they love can't talk to them anymore and they're crying, And so and then finally, theoretically, you come into a knowingness, okay, I must be dead because I just attended my own funeral. Now what? So I would say that's probably the biggest issue there. I'm trying to think of anything regarding that topic that is like that I'm missing. But I think that's it. I mean, yeah, that would be my answer to like general anesthetic. I think sometimes though too, again, this comes down to what our class today was about, some of the worldly meditations with shamanism, right? And so we were talking about that you don't want to bring stuff back. Well, you also don't really want to leave stuff unless your intention was to leave it. So in those places where like say a comatic state where then, this person gets ushered back, right? But like they're just not the same. And we know it's not let's act like we know it's not a physical issue, right? That their spirit came back a little bit off. Well, then I would do the same thing. I'd go find a shaman. I'd be like, hey, we got to go figure out what happened, what he left, what she left. So if they come back angry and pissed all the time, my knee-jerk response might be that the part of you that is more mellow, the part of you that is sweeter, the part of you that's this, and this, it might have found a zone in the astral that felt that way too. And it didn't want to come back.
Yeah.
So you don't always lose pieces of yourself in those very unique situations where you're quote unquote lost in the astral. There are parts of you that might decide they like it better because that also reminds them of home. It reminds us of, we know the human experience is challenging. We know that it's much more dense than what our spirit really enjoys. So we wouldn't fault it for saying, no, I'm going to chill here. This is like way better. You know what I mean? So we're always subject to leaving things behind. We want to be very mindful that we don't bring stuff back in meditations or anything like that. Because, our personality comes from our spirit, doesn't it?
I think
like unless you have like you take a blow to the brain and then now part of your brain's damaged, then it's a body thing too. But if you remain unscathed and you're not doing a bunch of drugs that influence the way that all these things roll, you need a spirit to have the emotions, right? And that's also true why your temperament remains relatively similar across lifetimes. If you're a naturally inquisitive energy, you're going to be that way for a long time. It's, you know what I mean? Everyone has a song and they sing it over lifetimes. So that's one of the reasons too why I mention all that. I don't even remember. I always ramble with you. I need to get that under control. But anywho, well, it is, and I love and but it's hard sometimes too because I think I'm like speaking, trying to finish a thought, and then sometimes the brain is over here having a fleshed out conversation that's being queued up next. Or I'm being criticized for not saying enough about something else. I'm just having to deal with that. Sometimes I'm like, all right, this is probably why I lose my train of thought sometimes.
Say this thing.
Right. And you're like, I'm only one person. Give me a second. I'm trying. But no, dude, and we bring all this up because whether you meditate 8 hours a day or not, whether you decide that you want to investigate the metaphysical world, I guess the thing that, Mindy and I are wanting to bring to the table as a thought form is there is so much that we are affected by that it would be almost irresponsible to not at least understand how it could affect you and how to protect from that. And then just chill. If you don't believe in a guide system, that's okay. If you don't believe in God, that's okay. If you believe in all of it, and that's okay. But more than anything, it would be really an ideal situation for you to at least have faith that you have some control over the way that you're affected by these unseen forces. Because it is real. We do. And some could argue that we have a responsibility to it. I think the I Ching is like one of the biggest ones saying, hey, it's your job. It's no one else's job to manage and maintain your spiritual health. We call it, spiritual hygiene, to know yourself well enough to not let your more base emotions fire off big decisions.
Right.
These are all things that are going to just make your life easier for you to live it. Because it's already hard from the exterior. Don't make it hard by it being confused and under assault all the time from within too.
And intentionality, I think, is incredibly important. Like, especially when, like when you said, if you're going to meditate 8 hours a day, or you should have an intention of when you're going to try something. Like, what do you want the result to be, or what's the reason that you're doing it? Because I'm just going to play with this thing and I don't even know what's going to happen. I feel like that leaves you a little bit more unprotected, even if you don't know what's out there or whatever, you're going to want a reason to be there, or an outcome or something, I think that makes a difference rather than just walking blindly. Like, you don't put a blindfold on and go out your front door. Most people don't. Maybe some people do. I don't know.
Well, and we'll touch on this, and I know you got to pick up the kiddos, so I'll let you go. But that's an excellent point. And the equivalent I could make of that is this: energy is always everywhere. Always. We can't avoid it.
Right.
But a lot of people live very separate. And so the energies that live on that other world in the astral or in the unseen, they don't even perceive those that can't, that don't believe or can't, as all that much valuable. Like if they're going to hang around you, there has to be a different reason because you don't believe. So the energy that you can give them is not that high, or, you know what I mean? Like it's, they're not as interested, right? So wouldn't it make somebody much more interesting if they sent up a flare essentially that said, I do believe and I do know that this exists and I am, a player in this game, in this other world? Well, the benefit of that is that you get to, you essentially start to cohabit both worlds that you really have. So it's a balanced existence, right? But what you're talking about, that sort of randomized behavior patterns that we see a lot that are dangerous because people don't know what they're doing. So for instance, if I light a candle, and I found this off TikTok, and I light through candles and then I say the name of the guy that I want to like me 8 times or whatever the bullshit, or, the thing is that people are doing. You are an untrained individual. You have never really flexed the muscle that it's spiritual. But now you're doing these behaviors that are indicative of, well, you're a player in the game. And so you have to understand that if you are going to be seen as that way, you damn well better be able to support what that really means. I have energy in and out of my apartment quite a bit. I do a lot of readings here. Plus, I'm a pretty in connection person. So if I was scared of that, I'm about to be terrified. And that's going to negatively affect my confidence, negatively affect how I feel safe in my own home. It might turn me into a very most paralytic version of myself. My ambition might dry up. My appetite might decrease. Like all these things that fear does when you start to see things and experience things that you can't understand.
Yeah.
and all just because you wanted this guy to like you and you saw on TikTok that you should light 3 candles. Well, no, you opened that door to that world and you don't even know what that means and you don't know how to stand strong within it. And we don't mean this to scare anybody, but we're saying be wise.
You're sending up flares and you don't know who's going to see them,
And so if there was an energy that was, desiring to take advantage of somebody who recognized and acknowledged the metaphysics, you've kind of put yourself up as a candidate. So I just mean to say, be very, very cautious about some of the ritualized things or some of the, you know what I mean? Like if it seems a little bit weird, probably just pause and like go investigate if it is weird, or if you feel ready to even present yourself as somebody who works in this world. Because a lot of what we can do and a lot of what we actively do has very little with the physical ritualistic things, and just sitting here saying, I have a desire for this. I have a desire to feel safe. I have a desire to not be influenced by the feelings and emotions and energies of others. You see what I mean? Like that's different. That's not magic. That's not conjuring. That's not seeking protection from other entities. That's not ritualizing elements to create change and force in the physical world. You know what I mean? Like we have to start with our own energy, right?
Yes.
And maybe leave the management and manipulation of other energy to not us, right? I don't know who needs to be in charge of that, but it's not me, it's not my people, it's not the people I hang out with. You know what I mean? I think part of hygiene is not borrowing energy to exact the change I want. That's a lot of what magic is.
Well, it's kind of like you said this, I think it was during the class, but it's like having a gun, and not knowing how to use it or something.
God, yeah.
You shouldn't, some of these things you shouldn't just pick up if you don't know anything about it and just play with them,
Prime example, we talked about this during class, the Ouija board thing. Yeah. How often I've heard stories of that the Ouija board was super, super nice at first and all this stuff. And then before you know it, it's starting to ask for things. Yeah. That's how spirit is. You do a ritual over here and you're like, oh my God, that guy loves me. He just blew up my phone. It's working. And then before you know it, you do it again. Say you only do it once, right? Then you and that guy break up. And then 2 years from now, you do it again. But whatever helped you, it might get in your brain. So it might not give it to you that one time. So you're like, well, what do I have to do? Do I have to do more of a ritual? Do I have to light more candles? Then before you know it, you're giving over blood and your whole life is different. And you're like, this is a slippery slope.
It's the slot machine. Like, differential reward. And then you're like, I'm going to keep pulling.
Oh man. And then before you know it, maybe say the energy is, this is one thing I keep feeling around the Diddy thing that I think is so hilarious and so sad. And so like all the things is any time that you are, us soul bearing, not of the earth, we are never going to be protected by these energies that those people are working with. Like they think that they are because they give them wealth and prestige and all this stuff. And maybe they're like, yeah, I sacrificed my mom, but I didn't like her anyway. So that's a valuable trade. And now I have all this money and power. But the moment that you stop being able to provide to them more energy or new people or new food, you think that they care. They will dip so quickly and they just don't care. They're not like us and they envy us quite a bit. So you never have the friends that you think you do in those earth plane energies. I promise. Even if it's a uninvested energy, like think about the most gray right in the middle of dark and black. They're never, if it costs them energy or it's inconvenient at all, no energy is going to benefit us. They're just not vested in us in that way. And the energies that are of the earth plane who do want to help us, they do it for free.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of elemental energy that will come and be supportive of us depending on whether or not it's feeling particularly kind, right? Because they have moods like we have moods, man. And maybe there's something about your energy that sings to them, and maybe they'll come and give you some energy because you feel familiar, right? But they don't ever ask you for anything, and you probably don't even know they do it. That's the difference of the light and dark, right?
Yeah.
So, just really, I'm always very cautious of interacting with energies that are, maybe pretending they're going to be on your side. And then the next question, of course, would be, well, you talk about these guides all the time. What if the guides are? Well, that has a very different vibration. And it's of wherever our soul came from, the guides feel like that too.
But
you can
they're
tell.
consistent. They're consistent, and like you said, they don't cost. They don't
ask for anything.
Yeah, they don't cost you anything. They don't ask you to do anything for them. It's not like that. It's just like kind of guidance, is it? Like what I'm saying.
And you have to ask for it too. Like, notice they don't ever interject.
And it's subtle. It's not always. It's not always like just in your face, and it's not like on somebody's talking. It's not like the angel on your shoulder telling you to do something.
Well, they protect free will, and the dark energies don't. You hear all the time these people who get obsessed with the Ouija board, and out of nowhere they're like on their lunch break trying to go home to play with it. That's not personal native curiosity and attachment. That's something in your head saying you want to be here, don't you? You want to hang out, don't you?
Yeah. So you said like when they're obsessed with the Ouija board, and the Ouija board was like, like giving them whatever, like doing more, being more active or something.
Mm-hmm.
When I found myself getting like obsessed on focusing on like trying to get information from my guides,
mm-hmm.
which, like obsession is a hard thing for me because I have to stop doing it. But it's like, that is when, being something in my best interest, they pull back.
Yep.
And they're like, we're not going to participate in this.
Yeah.
We're not going to participate in all of this stuff you're trying to do, and like you said, and I was like, I was trying too hard. I was trying too hard to just like contact them or hear them or, and it's like, it's not like that. It's like, you learn it, so you just let go, and then it comes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if you were trying to make water come out of a hose, but you're pinching it so hard that it's not going to come.
Exactly. Or you get less of it than you otherwise would have.
Let it go. Let it flow.
Amen. And they're smart. Like I've mentioned this before, where it's like, I think they know that with my ego being what it is, my gifts have to come in a certain way, which for me, unfortunately, means I'm always uncertain about how accurate I am until I say it. Mm-hmm. And then that's when people say, oh, how did you, the accuracy. But I never really go into this 100% confident that what I'm about to say will ever even make sense. And that's from them, because I think that they don't want me to abuse the process. And for you, they didn't want you abusing the process of seeking their help, because you were trying to live your life through them. And they're like, we don't do that.
Yeah, like, tell me this, tell me that.
If it was a dark energy, be like, oh, don't worry, scoot over all the way. We'll take care of this.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's like, so the difference, because when you're doing something not in your best interest, they're not gonna support it.
I know you got to get going. I'm going to as well. I want you to know I'm so grateful that you did this with me, and I'm so grateful that you're a student of mine. I think you're so gifted and very dedicated to the process of understanding. And to me, it's like, that's everything. Okay,
It was fun to get to talk about all of it and learn more.
We're gonna have to do this again.
Okay.
All right. Take care, and I will talk to you next week for class.
All right. See you then.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.